Welcome to Actual Scale Modelling. This is part 3 of the Trumpeter Yonkers GU H7A Stuka scale 1 to 24. In part 2 I made up the cockpit, and in part 3 I will be assembling the fuselage and wings. So let's jump into this. Before I can close up the fuselage, there's a couple of bits of prep work we have to do. So this is the wheel housing, and it's getting painted in River Aquacolor 57 grey, and this will be the main colour for the interior, other than the cockpit. The actual inside the side walls, there's not a lot of painting needed to be done, and it's just around the edges that you'll have to put in some colour. The tyres are a simple process to make up. You have the rubber tyre in the middle insert. It did take a bit of pressure to push in the middle insert. You may want to use a pair of pliers or something to get it in if you don't have a bit of strength in your hands to push in. It did take quite a bit to get it in. They are able to free move as well, just don't put any cement on the actual pin for the wheel. And if you do it how I did it, put in the location pin first, then cement. That way you shouldn't get any cement onto the actual wheel itself and allow it to free move. The cockpit fitted in really well. There's a couple of ridges where it just sits into, so a minimum amount of cement is all that's required. You may wish to clamp up the sides a little bit. I did, just to make sure they are bond well to the side of the fuselage. It's not really that necessary, it's just a peace of mind really. The real wheel is next. That just sits in the house, and it fits in a square, so there's no chance of getting it into the wrong position. The tip of the house end just fits in really snugly, as you can see there. It's now time to close it up. The lining up of the second half of the fuselage went on smoothly. I would recommend that you cement this in parts. So I've started with the tail end just because that's the easiest part to line up. I cemented that, then once that was clamped off, I placed a little bit more cement down the seam and then clamped that off. But for now, all I bought is cement on the tail fin, and I'm just hold it in position with a clamp until that dries. And I just work my way down to the front of the model, clamping as I go, cementing as I go as well. As I do it in stages, that way you shouldn't have a problem lining it all up. So now it's all dry, the clamps are off. You want to check to see for the seams and things like that. There's a little bit of a seam there and a tiny bit on top, so it's time to sand them down. Now I'm starting off with a rough grit sanding stick to get all the excess off, and just working down grits of sand, the paper or stick, to eventually bring it to a smooth surface. You want to end up with extra fine sanding paper at the end just to polish up the unit. And once the sand was all complete, I'm just going to rescore some of the panel lines. It's now time for the instrument panel decal. It's quite a big decal. So like all decals, I'll place it in some warm water to soften it up. On the actual part itself, I'm using microsol and microset. So I'm starting with microsol, just putting a liberal coating all over the part. There's a lot of raised areas on this instrument panel, so the microsol and microset is ideal for this. It softens the decal to conform to all curves and dents, bumps on the surface, so eventually it will all melt into it. So once the microsol set is on, I place on the decal, brush out any air and whatnot from the decal, and then it's a microsol on the top of the decal to soften it either further to conform to the contours of the instrument panel. Since the tailwind, now I'm doing a slightly out of sequence. This was painted a couple of days ago. I made a small tutorial how to paint yellows, so check that out if you haven't done so already. So I'm just putting on the yellow on the tail fin, and I'm using River Aquacolor 310 Lufthansa yellow for this. So check out the video and explain what I'm doing here on the actual painting of the tail fin or rudder. There's a simple case putting them together. As you can see there, they're just two halves fit nicely onto each other. Shouldn't cause you any problems. So I've started making up the tail wings now. I've made up both halves and I'm just putting on the ends now. There's two location points for the flaps to go in. They just slot in, and then two hinge brackets to keep them in place. Worth pointing out, these hinge bracket things, they go on the bottom part of the ring. Now for the tail fin or rudder, I'm not actually cementing this on just yet. I'm keeping this off because of painting, but I need to fit the two brackets first. So I'm just placing the tail fin on just for positioning before I place the two brackets on. And once they're on, I shall remove the rudder again. So that's it on, and as you see, the rudder just pulls off and the two brackets are in place. I'm using Tamiya's XF23 light blue for the struts that hold the real wings in place. They won't be going on until near the end, but I thought it would be better just to paint them now so I know they're done. It's time to place on the rear wings. These went in very simply. There was no movement once they slotted in. Just a couple of seconds of holding and that was it. Tamiya's XF56 metallic grey. I'm using this to paint the housing for the gun sights that go inside the cockpit. There's a small clear part that goes onto this gun sighting, so I'm using a bit of canopy glue here to fit the clear piece. Such a small piece you can barely see it on camera, and once it's made up it just pushes into the slot where the instrument panel is. It protrudes out quite a bit, so just beware of the positioning of it. So you may find it difficult to get the position done properly. You can see how much it sticks out there, and it fits into the housing, which is the next part of the cockpit to go on the top half of the aircraft. But there's a nice backing plate for this to sit on, so you shouldn't have any difficulty in positioning of it. So once it was dry, it's time to put it on. This fitted in really nicely. There's a couple of rails there it runs along that can just slot in. Again, I didn't need to put any clamps or anything on this. Once it was in position, I just held it down for a few seconds for it to bond. It's always a good idea to check alignment after you put such a big piece like that on. So just have a look, make sure you're happy with it before the glue completely settles in. So I'm moving on to the lower section of the wings, the middle section, and I'm painting with Rebel Alcohol 57 grey for the viewing housing that sits in the centre of the next piece. So this is just for the inside of the housing. It needs to be painted or it would look wrong once it was on. So there's the middle part there, waiting for this piece to go in. There is two clear parts to go on here as well. But while that's drying, I'm moving on to the middle section and I'm putting in the wing struts. There's two to go in, and they can only go in a certain way. There's one pin for the back one and two pins for the front one. So it's quite clear how they go in. Just be sure that you cement them properly, because these are a vital part to the actual construction of the kit. So it's now time to put the clear window into the unit that I made up earlier on. And so I'm using my canopy glue here, just put it around the ridge. Now this one is the window that's going to be facing inside the aircraft, and once the glue is in position, it's time to place it on. Now there is a second window, as I said, that goes onto here, but it will not be placing that on until the end, because that will be on the outer part of the aircraft. Because I'm building a slightly out of sequence, so it's wise to mark on your instruction sheet which parts you're leaving off. So I'm just marking them with an X and just writing in when I'm going to be placing the part, and the other part I'll just mark with the tick that I've already done it. I'm now gluing in the housing into the middle section of the wing. Be careful here. It does sit on a little bracket, but I found even though it had dried later on, when I was putting it on, it did pop off again because it was exerting too much pressure putting on this middle section. There is a lip as well. Don't worry about the lip. The lip is meant to be there. It's now time to put on the top of the wings. They just sit in on top. The location pins help guide it in. You may need a couple of clamps just to hold it in place. Next is to drill some pilot holes for the weapon systems that will be going on near the end. Just check the instructions for what weapons you're going to be putting on. Bear that in mind before you drill your holes. I'm using Rivet Color 310 with answer yellow for the under part of the wings and the wingtips here. Now the reason why I'm painting them now is because I always forget to do it when I'm on the painting process. Don't know why I always forget, but I do. So I'm just painting them in now. They of course will need a bit of touch up afterwards, but it's not a problem down the line. As long as the main colour's on here in the first place, it shouldn't be any problems. At this point, you have a couple of options how you want to go on the wings, guns and so forth. So I'm just painting in the guns now with Tamiya's X10 gunmetal. These are just small tiny parts. They'll be going on near the end as well. So as you can see in the instructions that I'm pointing out, these are the options that I've decided to go for. This is the housing for the guns. Again, depends on what variant you're doing, is which parts you'll put together here, and then the two wing tips for the main wings. There's a couple of covers that go onto the wings. Just be careful of these because they only go on a certain way. It does point out on the instructions how they should go on. There's a couple of lines that needed to be rescored. I thought they were a bit shallow, so I'm just making them a little bit deeper. They are extremely tight going on. You may wish to file it down slightly if you find it difficult for them to go on, but just pressing them hard should be able to fit them. Do the smaller one first before you go into the larger one. It just seemed easier that way to place them in. Try and get them as flush as possible to the wing. You don't want to have to try and sand these down if they're not. So now it's time to put the wings together. They go on quite simply, just marry up the two halves. You will need a few clamps to hold it in place though. When you're putting this many clamps on, just make sure you've kept the alignment of the wing. More often than not, they can slip out of alignment and you'll end up with a lot of filing to do just to get them back looking normal again. So once it's clamped, it's time to put on the gun housing and then the wingtip. The instructions say put this on later, but I think they're referring to the two little location lights that go right at the tip of these wings. So that's what I done. I placed the wingtips on and I'll put on the location lights right at the end. I'm using Rebel Aquacolor 90 Silver, and this is for the little lamp that goes inside the wing. And don't forget to paint all the little inside parts of the wing that will be exposed. More often than not, a lot of people forget to paint these and it just puts off the balance of the model once it's complete. So once the paint's dry, it's just a matter of fitting this little lamp. It just sits on a little bracket there. I'm using Tamiya's X27 Clear Red and X25 Clear Green for the two location lights that go at the end of the wings. Now it's time to fit the middle part of the wings, and this just should push in. It's a little bit firm to get in, but that's to the good. There's not much mucking about with it once it slots in. Just be aware of the housing. This was where it popped off for me, so I had to re-glue it. But if it does happen, there is enough room to place it back in. So as you can see there, I'm just having to place it back in. It still sits on its bracket, and then for the main wings to go on, they just push on to the location rods here. You won't need any clamps. You just have to hold it for a few minutes to make sure it bonds, but the fitting on these wings is really good. I did have a little bit of a gap that I noticed once they were dry. That was mainly due to me, I think, not holding them properly. But it was just a tiny little bit of filler needed to take care of that. Well, I think this is a good place to bring part 3 to an end. In part 4, I'll be dealing with the underside of the wings, putting on the furniture to hold the weapons, and also doing the landing gear. If you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the other parts to this build, or indeed the other videos on the channel. Also, try and make sure you have a look at the little tutorial video how I painted the yellow on the tail fin and on the underside of the wings. Subscribe to the channel for updates. I will be planning on doing more tutorials. I've got one for how I make my own filler coming up. Hit that like button, and of course you can leave any comments. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.